Holy shit. Did you guys see what happened with Block? I'm talking about the company formerly known as Square, ticker SQ, and they just got the golden ticket, S&P 500 inclusion, baby. The announcement came for inclusion on July 23rd, 2025, and the stock absolutely exploded in after-hours trading. We're talking about a 10% jump just on the announcement alone, but here's the thing that's got me really excited. This isn't just some random fintech company getting lucky. Block has been building towards this moment for years, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised it took this long. Think about it. Jack Dorsey's vision of democratizing access to the global economy isn't just some Silicon Valley buzzword bullshit anymore. They've actually built it. We're looking at a company that has Square for merchants, Cash App for consumers, Afterpay for buy now, pay later, Tidal for music, and even hardware Bitcoin wallets with BitKey. That's not a payments company. That's a fucking ecosystem. And they're replacing Hess Corp in the S&P 500, which is hilarious when you think about it. An oil company getting swapped out for a Bitcoin-obsessed fintech company. That's the energy transition happening in real time, folks. The old economy literally making room for the new economy. And Block meeting all the S&P requirements, and they've been profitable for the past few quarters. This isn't some meme stock inclusion. This is legitimate recognition that digital payments and crypto are now mainstream infrastructure. Let's talk about why this S&P 500 inclusion is so much bigger than just another fintech company makes it. Jack Dorsey has been absolutely obsessed with Bitcoin for years, and while everyone was calling him crazy for walking away from Twitter to focus on this stuff, he was actually playing 4D chess. Block's Bitcoin integration isn't some side project or marketing gimmick. It's literally woven into the fabric of everything they do. Cash App lets you buy Bitcoin, obviously, but they also support Lightning Network payments, which means faster and cheaper Bitcoin transactions. You can even set up your paycheck to automatically convert a portion to Bitcoin or round up your purchases to buy Bitcoin. That's not just crypto adoption. That's crypto becoming invisible infrastructure, which is exactly what needs to happen for mass adoption. But here's where it gets really interesting. Block just announced they're integrating Bitcoin payments into their Square Merchant platform. I'm talking about actual point of sale systems where your local coffee shop can accept Bitcoin payments directly through their Square hardware. They demoed this at the Bitcoin 2025 conference, and full rollout is planned for 2026. You realize what this means? This could be the moment Bitcoin goes from weird internet money to just another payment option at millions of merchants worldwide. And the timing couldn't be better with all this regulatory clarity we're getting from Congress this week. Actually, let me back up for a second because there's another angle here that's absolutely wild. Block isn't just helping people use Bitcoin, they're also mining it. They pulled back from their TBD web platform stuff to focus on Bitcoin mining with their own ASIC technology. They're partnering with companies like Core Scientific for large-scale mining operations. So they're literally building the infrastructure, providing the payment rails and securing the network. That's not just being bullish on Bitcoin. That's being the backbone of Bitcoin. Here's what most people don't understand about S&P 500 inclusions. It's not just about prestige, though that matters. It's about forced buying. Index funds and ETFs that track the S&P 500 have to buy Block stock to match their benchmarks. We're talking about trillions of dollars in index funds that now have to allocate a portion to Block. That's not discretionary buying based on whether fund managers like the company. That's mandatory purchasing. And that creates this beautiful supply-demand imbalance that can drive prices up significantly. But beyond the mechanical buying pressure, there's a psychological shift that happens. Block was trading in the penalty box for a while, down about 14% year to date before this announcement. Why? Because investors were treating it like a risky growth stock in a high interest rate environment. But S&P 500 inclusion says this is a stable, established company that belongs with Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. That's a massive reframing of how investors think about Block. Instead of, will this fintech startup survive? It becomes, how much of this established digital payments infrastructure should I own? Completely different questions, completely different valuations. The company reports Q2 earnings on August 7th, which could be another catalyst. If they show strong growth in both Square Merchant Services and Cash App usage, especially with their Bitcoin integrations gaining traction, this could be the beginning of a serious re-rating. Analysts are already talking about how Block could hit the Rule of 40 by 2026. That's when your revenue growth rate plus profit margin equals 40% or more. That's the gold standard for sustainable, profitable growth. And honestly, with their diversified revenue streams and Bitcoin exposure, they might get there faster than people expect. What really gets me excited about Block, and why I think this S&P 500 inclusion is just the beginning, is the ecosystem synergies that most people completely miss. Everyone analyzes Square and Cash App as separate businesses, but that's like analyzing Amazon's retail and AWS as separate companies. The magic happens where they intersect. Think about this. Square serves millions of small and medium businesses. Cash App serves tens of millions of consumers. What happens when those consumers start shopping at Square merchants and can pay with Bitcoin through Cash App? What happens when Square merchants want to manage their business finances through Cash App? What happens when Afterpay Buy Now Pay Later gets integrated across both platforms? You get this virtuous cycle where each side of the platform makes the other side more valuable, and then there's the Bitcoin layer on top of everything. Square merchants earning Bitcoin, Cash App users spending Bitcoin, Lightning Network connecting it all together seamlessly. Block isn't just building a payments company, they're building the financial infrastructure for a Bitcoin economy. And here's something wild I just realized. Block might be one of the few companies that's positioned to benefit from both the traditional financial system and the Bitcoin economy simultaneously. If Bitcoin succeeds as digital money, Block wins big because they're deeply integrated into that ecosystem. If Bitcoin fails and just becomes a store of value asset like digital gold, Block still wins because Cash App is one of the easiest ways for regular people to buy and hold Bitcoin. That's a pretty good hedge, actually. Plus, they've got all their traditional payment processing, which isn't going anywhere regardless of what happens with crypto. But the real kicker, they're doing all this while maintaining relationships with traditional banks and financial institutions. They're not trying to replace the system, they're trying to upgrade it. That's way smarter than the burn it all down approach that some crypto companies took. Here's something that doesn't get enough attention. Block is quietly becoming an AI company too. Not in the flashy ChatGPT way, but in the make financial services smarter and more efficient way. They're using machine learning for fraud detection, risk assessment, personalized financial advice through Cash App, and merchant analytics through Square. When you have millions of transactions flowing through your platform every day, you generate incredible amounts of data. And that data becomes the training ground for AI systems that can predict spending patterns, detect fraud, optimize cash flow for merchants, and provide personalized financial guidance for consumers. This is where Block's ecosystem advantage becomes even more powerful. Traditional banks might have transaction data, but they don't have the integrated merchant and consumer view that Block has. Fintech startups might have AI capabilities, but they don't have the scale and data that Block has. Block sits in this unique position where they have both the data and the technology to build the next generation of AI-powered financial services. And they're doing it while being Bitcoin native, which means they're building AI systems that understand both traditional finance and crypto from the ground up. That's going to be incredibly valuable as the financial world continues to evolve. I keep thinking about how Amazon started as a bookstore but became this massive cloud computing company because they had to build all this infrastructure to run their retail business. And then they realized other companies needed that same infrastructure. Block might be on a similar path. They're building all this AI and Bitcoin infrastructure to power their own payment platforms, but that infrastructure could become incredibly valuable to other companies as well. The Proto division, even though it's not getting much attention right now, could be working on exactly this kind of thing. Looking at this moment in financial history, I think we're witnessing a perfect storm for Block. The S&P 500 inclusion announcement was just the most visible catalyst, but there's so much more happening underneath. We've got crypto regulation finally getting sorted out in Congress. progress, which removes a huge overhang for Block's Bitcoin strategy. We've got AI infrastructure becoming more valuable every day, which plays into Block's data and technology advantages. We've got traditional finance finally accepting that digital payments aren't just a fintech thing anymore, they're core infrastructure. And Block is positioned at the intersection of all these trends. What really excites me about the next few years is that Block is still relatively early in their transformation. The Bitcoin payment integration for Square merchants doesn't fully roll out until 2026. Their mining operations are still scaling up, the AI-powered features are still being developed, the international expansion is still happening, the ecosystem synergies are still being realized. This S&P 500 inclusion might be the recognition of what Block has accomplished so far, but I think their biggest wins are still ahead of them. If Bitcoin continues to gain mainstream adoption, Block will be one of the primary beneficiaries. If the traditional financial system continues to digitize, Block will be a key infrastructure provider. If AI transforms how we interact with money, Block will be building those experiences. That's a pretty good place to be. And honestly, after watching Jack Dorsey walk away from Twitter, which seemed crazy at the time, to focus on just a payments company, it's looking more and more like he made the right call. Sometimes the boring infrastructure plays end up being the most valuable companies in the world.